Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Vercellotti. I'm the section head of classical hematology at the University of Minnesota, and I'm here to talk about a dear friend and colleague, a great member of ISTH, Dr. Gerhard Johnson. Gary passed away March 28th, 2025, but he leaves a legacy of brilliance in hematology, thrombosis, and hemostasis. Gary was a graduate of the University of Minnesota Medical School and then did his training at the Mayo Graduate School of Medicine. He finished his internal medicine residency and hematology fellowship, and then joined the U.S. Public Health Service. And in fact, back in 1965, he had a grant on blood platelet research. That really catapulted his research in thrombosis and hemostasis for the rest of his career. I'd like to highlight this amazing individual's breadth and depth. Gary has published 3 first author New England Journal papers, 1 science paper. He made major contributions to enoxaparin gaining FDA approval. And for the ISTH, he was extremely dedicated and served as chairman of the Scientific and Standardization Committee of the ISTH. He also was the first chairman of the Clinical Guidance Committee of ISTH. He had expertise in multiple areas of hematology, including hemolysis and G6PD deficiency, platelet aggregation, the role of G proteins in hematology, anticoagulation management, and was also a malignant hematologist and took care of lymphoma, etc. So I wanted to review with the ISTH. He was first a member of the International Advisory Committee in 1980. And then he spent several years on the Scientific and Standardization Committees of ISTH, and ultimately was chairman of the subcommittee on animal models of hemorrhagic and thrombotic disorders of the Scientific and Standardization Committee. That's relevant because Gary's initial studies, as I will tell you about, was looking at platelet aggregation in dogs, and he made some seminal observations on platelet biology. He also served as a fellow of the Arteriosclerosis, Thrombosis, and Vascular Biology group of the American Heart Association. And then in 2000, he was elected a member of the Scientific and Standardization Committee of ISTH. He served as secretary and chairman-elect, and then chairman in 2008 to 2010. He was in Vienna, Cairo, and Boston for those meetings. He really started out with understanding bleeding and the role of the platelet. One of his first papers was on the impact that antibiotics had on platelet aggregation. He had a paper in the American Journal of Pathology looking at how parenteral antibiotics, carbenicillin and ticarcillin, affected platelet function in dogs. His really landmark study was published on the effect of multiple aggregants in dogs for platelet aggregation. For example, he showed that in mongrel dogs that they did not respond to epinephrine. That really gave a clue to understanding the signal transduction of platelets, which included arachidonate. He did several of these studies with one of the great platelet biologists and a great member of the ISTH, Dr. James White, who was very famous for his studies on electron microscopy of platelets. He went on to do further studies on looking at platelet aggregation and the effect of aspirin. And then on a personal note, It was when monoclonal antibodies were being first made in the laboratory. And a rheumatology group of doctors Curry and Mesner had an antibody that they thought was against beta-2 microglobulin. And they asked me to test it on blood cells. At the time, I was working on neutrophil endothelial interactions and did some platelet aggregometry. Well, this monoclonal antibody that they sent to me blocked platelet aggregation, and specifically the second wave of aggregation. I called Gary. I said, Gary, you're the platelet guru, and why don't you take a look at this antibody? Well, Gary went on to show that this monoclonal antibody reacted with beta-2 microglobulin of the HLA complex and probably interacted with the thromboxane receptor. He actually presented this data at the plenary session of the American Society of Hematology in 1982. He also then ultimately published it in Science in 1984. He also worked on other clinical papers and in platelet aggregation, and then moved on and always was interested in anticoagulation in cancer. He was involved at the VA, where he was a VA Merit Award winner for many years. These were highly competitive grants, and Gary was funded for several years as part of the VA Merit Review Research Grant Program. He did studies on the effect of warfarin to prevent thrombosis in cancer patients as part of a VA study. Subsequently, he worked on enoxaparin and compared it to unfractionated heparin to prevent postoperative venous thrombosis in knee replacement. In those studies, he was able to show how enoxaparin was as good as warfarin, and ultimately FDA approval for enoxaparin occurred. When I think of Gary, I think about him as a straight shooter. Gary was an amazing addition to our hematology group. I first met him when I was a fellow in '79. And when I say straight shooter, you could present something to Gary and he would say either yep or no. And when he said no, he didn't just do it offhandedly. He provided a rationale, evidence, and data for why this study doesn't show what it purports to show, or this patient really has some other problem, and that the interpretation of the data really is not correct. It was great. And anybody who knew Gerhard, or as we called him locally, Gary, can remember him in his Scandinavian stoic way, being so straightforward in science and in clinical care. He really told you what he thought was correct. And I really appreciated it as we went through our careers together. Gary was an educator. He was head of the blood course back in the 1970s and was an early adopter of problem-based learning, and actually had a grant on problem-based learning in the late 70s and early 80s. He was a great mentor for fellows and for residents, and really loved medical students. He and his wife, Janet, and 5 children were pillars of the Minneapolis community. Each year, Gary and Janet would have a Christmas party in a Swedish style. Gary would be dressed up in lederhosen and be serving lutefisk and lefse and other herring and other Swedish delights. And we always had such a wonderful time at Gary's house. In the early 80s, I formed a hematology softball team, the Home Platelets. Gary played second base, and he loved playing baseball and coming to the local bar to review our losses usually, and having a beer and talking about the game. Gary really was so committed to the tripartite mission of academia, of research, education, and clinical care. He spent his whole career basically at the VA caring for veterans. A remarkable tribute and thanks to our veterans. Gary provided such outstanding care. Finally, I'd like to just say how much we miss him. I know that my colleague and good friend Nigel Key and I had many wonderful experiences with Gary. I can remember back going to Chicago to the Central Society of Clinical Research and going out to listen to Chicago blues with Gary. Gary was just a wonderful, wonderful hematologist who also was extremely committed to ISTH, as evidenced by his service for excellence in the Scientific and Standardization Committee. Gary, we'll miss you. Thank you. And I look forward to joining your softball team someday. Thank you.